right, welcome everybody. Avopod Podcast. Mike Hubbard,
Ken Jenkins.
and I'm 50 something,
And I'm 50 something. I
and
think together we know a little something
a little something.
about something.
Something.
Mike, tell us about our guest today. I'm excited
I am too.
to have this man on with us today.
I am too. I've been knowing Kevin for a long time.
Long time.
Long time. Good Morehouse man. And Kevin is a cultural strategist. And he's been running his own agency, Culture Lab. And for about 15 years, he's been helping clients navigate exponential media, tech, and cultural change.
Excellent. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mike. Nice to be here. Nice to be with you guys.
I'm excited
I love
to have
what
you
guys
here.
are doing, bridging the gap between these generations. That's what's up.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on because we've known each other kind of in passing through mutual friends. So I've never really had the opportunity to really dig into your brain and find out what you do.
Right.
And because I hear nothing but positive and good stuff about what you do. And I read your posts all the time, man, and they're so intriguing. So, man, Mike, let's just get into it. Let's just start pummeling him with questions. And I'm going to take notes if that's all right.
Hey, Ken, I know you through Carol.
Carol Hampton.
Yeah, she's the connector.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
And then we met a couple of times. You remember my wife at the time, Donna.
Yeah, Donna.
Yeah.
Donna was a beautiful woman.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, we met. We were down at what is that room upstairs from the Blues Alley where we had some functions. You had some functions there, the executive room or something like that. I remember downtown.
Oh, the foundation.
The foundation room. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's part of the memory.
Yeah.
Right there is gone. Because I'm 50.
We got to warn you, we get easily distracted, Kevin.
Very easily distracted.
Hey, that's what it's all about. This is a conversation, right?
Right.
Amen.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
first off, what is a cultural strategist? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I reflect back to my Morehouse days, like in the 80s, and I had a best friend named Eric Rhodes. And Eric and we would always talk about music, film, pop culture. Like we were those nerds. We were two nerds, two peas in a pod. And we just spent all of our free time talking about, whatever was popping off, in the overall culture, whether it was Basquiat at that time and Prince. We were like masters of discussing Black culture. And so fast forward, 30 years later, I actually get a job as a cultural strategist for this agency out of New York called Sparks and Honey. And what Sparks and Honey did, they actually codified the study of culture. And so in my professional career, that was probably the most powerful experience I had because I learned some things in terms of how to formally dissect elements of culture and study them and help the understanding of trends that are developing, macro trends, micro trends. So there's a process called semiotics that they would use where you study data points coming in from all different facets of culture. And you piece those patterns together and you start formulating things that are happening in terms of overall trends. And so Sparks and Honey, I credit for giving me that discipline of studying culture. And then from that point on, I considered myself a cultural strategist. And even before that, I launched my own agency, Culture Lab, in 2006. And, there was a reason why I put culture in my name, right? Because I felt like that was my passion in understanding overall culture and where things were moving and helping clients navigate through these changing times, right? Like the whole interjection of digital really changed the whole formula for how we analyze culture. And so I started realizing that companies were having a hard time navigating these changes, and I wanted to play a part in helping them navigate those changes. So that's kind of what a cultural strategist is. Nothing more than an observer who can kind of like dissect things that are happening and make them palatable for companies and brands to help them better navigate and formulate outreach.
So typically, what kind of clients do you work with?
Well, right now, one thing I didn't say to you and Ken, is that right now I work for a company called Fluent 360. And Fluent 360 is a multicultural ad agency. And our focus is on helping clients, helping brands connect better with Hispanic, African American, and Asian American consumers. So that's really kind of like, I spend all day, every day with the client I have. I work on the US Army recruitment campaign. And I do nothing but study Gen Z and their values and their behaviors, and helping our client connect better with them for the sake of recruitment.
What would you find is one or two of your top challenges, or one or two of your the top most proficient ways of connecting with Gen Z?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, right now, I feel like Gen Z is at the forefront of everything right now. If you look at let's talk about what's happening in the country, right? We're experiencing something. I'm a 50-plus-year-old man.
He 50 something,
He is.
50 something,
and you 50 something.
and I've never experienced a time period like what we're going through here in America, where we have an outright fascist movement who is like anti-democracy, right? But when you strip away all the action of what's happening, at the root of it is demographic change and a value change. So Gen Z scares the shit out of boomers because their values are so radically different from the values of boomers. And so in my mind, I see boomers as being kind of like not necessarily the enemy, but they're scared of the change that we're facing. And the values that I speak about, Gen Z is that generation that has crystallized equality and acceptance from various different groups. Like, if you think about what happened last summer, who was out there protesting for Black Lives Matter? It wasn't all Black kids.
Right.
It was mostly white kids, right?
Right.
We had allies. We had a mass of allies out there in the streets fighting. And so that was representative, that was symbolic to me of what Gen Z represents. They are, in their value system, it's baked in that they are fair-minded and about equality and about acceptance of others. And so that is so radical to what, the previous generations have been about, mainly boomers, right? And so, if you look at like Fox News, who their demographic is boomers. And so they're the ones who are being radicalized.
Right.
And they're the ones who are trying to break the system so that the Gen Zers and the younger groups cannot benefit from all the things that they benefited from. So it's really interesting because Gen Z to me is like that radical generation, and they're large. I don't think people understand how large Gen Z is. It's about 82 million young people who represent, what we call Gen Z. And so they're larger than the boomers, actually. And so, we're starting to see politically their impact, right?
Right.
When you look at what happened in November, young people came out and voted. And here we are with all this anti-democratic regulation and laws instituted because the older people, the older racist people have nowhere else to go politically.
Right.
Can someone say Georgia?
Yeah, the numbers do not favor them. And that's what we're fighting against. And that's why I'm so alarmed about what we're seeing, because it's becoming so brazen and violent.
Right.
Because again, you could moderate your policies to be more accepting of the younger generations, but that's not what's happening. They're going further extreme to the right.
Right.
At the root of all of this is demographic change. One thing I want to say, I don't think people fully understand that when you look below the 24-year-old marker, 50% are non-white.
Right.
That is the problem that we're facing.
So Hispanics make up the largest percentage of Gen Z right now.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Well over 20%.
Wow.
And then you look at African Americans, Gen Z are around 15%.
Mm.
And then you add in Asians, and then you add in biracial people and other indigenous. And so what you're looking at is 50% of those who are under 24 are not white.
Huh.
And
Wow.
that's what we're fighting against. That is what is breaking our system, because those who are in power and who are white do not want to share this new generation, they don't want to share with this new demographic that's coming.
Right.
And it bodes very ominously for our country, and I don't, unless something major happens, we're going to have like serious fights ahead of us for rights and freedom.
But you kind of touched on their core values, Gen Z core values. Sounds like you're saying they're more compassionate, more community focused. They're not so much chasing the dollar.
Not at all. Not at all.
So
I mean,
should
like, you could even argue, Mike, that they're not as pro-capitalist as previous generations.
right, and I've had
Socialism socialism isn't a bad word to them.
it's not, and I've had these discussions with my son.
Kevin, I just found out that I'm a capitalist.
You just found out what?
That I'm a
Ken?
capitalist.
He didn't know that.
Oh,
I just found that out
He
the
didn't
other
know
day. But what this is interesting because, man, this is great having you on, brother, because you are saying exactly what our two Gen Z representatives that we had on the last episode were talking about in terms of their mindset. They're more into the fairness. They're more into the inclusion. And when we asked them, both Elijah and Jahari, your son and my daughter, last week, what would be the biggest change or the biggest thing that we see between the generations? And they talked about the acceptance of differences. They talked about the LGBTQ. Hopefully, forgive me if I don't have the alphabet right. They talked about just the inclusion. And so what you're saying is spot on.
Right, right.
and even amongst white kids, a lot of white kids, they view diversity as an asset. They want to work for companies and be a part of institutions that are diverse. The majority of them.
So should we, as 50-some-year-old people, I know there's a lot of things happening in this country that would create pessimism in us. But personally, I'm optimistic that Gen Z eventually is going to take over. I'm hoping. Should I be optimistic about that, or will this system that's being put in place be so hard to overtake that it won't matter?
I mean, that's a great question. That's a great question, Mike. I mean, I struggle. I'm going to be very candid. I struggle with being optimistic right now because if you know American history, you know how recalcitrant white supremacy is,
Right.
right? And it always figures out ways to sustain itself. And it scares me because I clearly see the system being broken so that the next generation cannot benefit. But there are some things that do give me a little bit of hope and optimism. Like, one immediate thing is if we can pass HR 1, the Voting Rights Act,
Right.
that would be a big step, a huge step that would kind of like help keep the door open for Gen Z to make a difference in voting.
Right.
Right now, the thing that frightens me the most is that, we are going outright fascist, anti-democratic from the majority of whites. And it's really painful to say the majority of whites, but that's, if you look at the numbers,
Right.
they are no longer for democracy.
Right.
That's frightening.
It is.
So that means that we're going to perpetually have these battles, these epic battles from this time hence. I don't know when it's going to stop, because we think of Trump as like, being defeated and going away. No, Trump was the beginning, and I almost feel like this Biden thing is borrowed time until the forces collapse
Wow.
into outright fascist apartheid type of system, because we know that this is the struggle of America. We're in a third Reconstruction right now. And the kids. The other side of that is I worry about the kids becoming, and when I say the kids, I mean Gen Zers becoming uh, disheartened and just checking out of the political process altogether.
Yeah, that
That
was
frightens me too.
yeah, because I was actually going to ask you that question
Right.
about do they see the political climate like we did? Are they more or less inclined, in your opinion, obviously, to be involved?
And do they think that that is the vehicle for change? Politics.
Yeah, I think that BLM had a lot of positive impact last summer. A lot of people are naysayers and saying that they didn't change anything. That's bullshit. The BLM movement helped fuel Trump's defeat. If there was no BLM, if there was no George Floyd, if there was no pandemic, we would probably be looking at a second Trump term, right?
Right.
But when these kids of color mobilized to vote and to be activists, because one thing about Gen Z that you guys probably know already by having Gen Z kids is that they are determined to make the world a better place.
Right.
They are determined. Nothing will stop them. They have this determination to create a world that is much better than what we are right now. So when you factor in that determination, you can't count them out. Their avenues may not be the traditional avenues of voting and politics, but we are seeing them. Like, I think about, at the AOCs of the world. Although she's a millennial, she's representative of Gen Z values. And I think that we're going to see more and more politicians who reflect those types of values.
I think if we can work with Gen Z, we can get a lot accomplished. But the question I have is, how do we relate to them with their values being so different from ours? And some of their values, I don't think we'll ever fully embrace. But there does need to be some cooperation. So how do we?
Mike, I'm laughing. I'm laughing. You know why I'm laughing? Because you are such a conservative at heart. You're saying we, but I'm thinking like most people of color are side right along with Gen Z. There is no difference.
Okay.
Whether they be old or young. That's you.
Okay. So I need to stop judging Gen Z, basically.
Yeah, your conservatism is shining through.
Okay.
But
all right.
But I, in all seriousness, I do believe that most people of color, whatever generation they're of, they can relate to Gen Z. Because they've been through. Our parents who went through Jim Crow, and
right.
They're natural allies.
Right. I think where the disconnect is going to come from, and where I've seen it, and we touched on this with our kids, the church and religion.
Yes.
And I was watching the Souls of America. Is that show?
Yes. Souls of America.
And they were talking to the pastor about, the LBGTQ.
I think that's it.
Did I get it? Okay.
We need some cue cards.
Right. But the pastor, he was categorizing that as sin. And the interviewer had to quickly, they don't view that as sin, sir. That's not. So I'm saying, how do we bridge that when we see that movement as something that's, well, not we, not me.
Yeah.
The church sees that as
We're gonna edit
sin,
that out. We're gonna edit that out.
but the Gen Zers see it as it's inclusiveness. And you guys have taught us the church is about love and embracing others. But when it comes to this, you want to push that out. So how do we, and like I said, you said most black people are in step with Gen Z. But for those of us who aren't, how do we get beyond that? Is that something we can get beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking about like that whole notion of sin. That's so I hate to say that, but
I can see
I
we're
mean,
gonna have to
like
get the beep
like
button.
Gen Zers will be
Have to
like,
put
"What
the
the
beep
fuck are you
button out
talking
on Kevin.
about?" Oh, can I curse? I'm sorry.
No, you
No,
good,
you all
man.
right, bro. You all
good.
right, bro.
Okay.
We're gonna edit. We're gonna edit this.
But I mean, like, what is sin? What I mean,
Right.
like, for real, what is sin? What is it?
Right.
Being human. Like Gen Z sees humanity.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, as humans, we have both good and bad in us. We do bad things, we do good things.
Right.
I mean, this whole notion of sin, I think, is a little bit antiquated. And with the power of the internet, it's given us a power to see beyond our immediate. When I think about my own childhood, I sat in Good Street Baptist Church every Sunday, bombarded with these messages about sin and hell and heaven. But now with the internet, I can see beyond that.
Right.
I can see various religions. I can see humanity, whether I be Sikh, or Muslim, or Taoist. I can see it all, and I don't see these people as going to hell. Right?
For me,
They are.
it's a matter of understanding that it is not the religion that necessarily is taking us down the wrong road. It's the interpretation of the religion. And the people make their sin less important than your sin. And we have these varying degrees of what's wrong and right. And the European interpretation of the Bible, included slavery being okay. So it's not the religion in of itself. It's the evilness within us that allows us to feel that we're okay in interpreting it our own way,
Right.
and then changing it and spitting it back out there so that it benefits us.
Right.
But I agree.
It's like branding.
Yeah.
It's tainted. The brand of religion is tainted right now, coming out of the Trumpism. It's tainted. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot. It's hard to separate all this.
It is.
It just is.
Yeah.
So it
Now,
sounds
the
kind of.
principles of Christianity
Go ahead.
will live on forever. The principles of Christianity are embedded in the values of Gen Z.
Right. Exactly.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you really look at it, you're right. So it seems like we're in a kind of a biblical situation where some of us gonna have to die off, basically.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to
They
wander.
never lied.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do some wandering in this wilderness, because all of us ain't gonna be able to step onto the promised land.
I had a Gen Z young person, just the other day, who mentioned they saw the previous podcast, and they were like, "Man, that's some interesting stuff. I'm glad you guys are talking about it, because I don't get to talk about this with my parents." But my point is, they said the same exact thing. It's just going to take some generations to die off.
Wow.
But let's face the fact: racism will never die off.
No, I'm with you on that.
There are plenty of white kids out there who are practicing white supremacy. There was a study that just came out last week that said that kids learn racism as early as 3 years old.
I mean, look at the woman. I think she was in New York, in the bagel shop or something,
Yeah, with 2 black kids.
with her kids in a stroller, and called a guy.
Hook me up. Put me up on that one. I don't know that one. What happened?
Called them a bitch.
There you go.
What?
Yeah. She was trying to get served, I guess, without a mask.
Okay, hold on. Who called who what?
I'll let Kevin
White
tell
lady.
the story.
The white lady with 2 black kids would not put on her mask to get served. And the black guy said, "Ma'am, I cannot serve you." And she kept saying, "Why?" And then she ended up saying,
Right. While she was pushing one kid in a stroller, and the other one looked to be 3 or 4 years old.
Black kids.
right. And it
Biracial,
came
I
out
guess.
today that the black father is livid and saying that she needs some help.
That's his woman. He need to get her.
The black father's mad at her.
Right.
I
But
couldn't imagine.
I'm saying that just say you're right. Racism isn't going anywhere.
On the next episode of Taking It to the Bridge.
can we talk a little bit about what Gen Z is going through?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No other generation in our lifetime has faced the myriad of like monumental
Yes.
bad stuff,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
pandemic, George Floyd, Trumpism. I mean, downturn economy. Like the real issue for Gen Z is jobs. I hate to say this, y'all, but we did a survey, and the survey said that 68% of Gen Z is experiencing mental duress.
68%.
We are facing 68%.
Wow.
So we're experiencing a generation that is mentally traumatized.
It's like a scene out of, remember, what was the movie where I think it was Chris Rock was playing, and they had a pool table there, and the guy was saying something about the earth being the pool table and the black ball is the one ball that keeps getting, everyone's going after the black ball. What movie was that? You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? I
Was it
forget.
Martin
what
Lawrence and Boomerang?
Boomerang.
I think it was
Boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I told you we were easily distracted. At least I am.